Alright guys, I could tell based on how the worksheet went earlier that a lot of you had trouble with the passive formation, and I speculate may have forgotten almost everything we did with passive verbs last year. So I want to go over those with you really quickly. In Latin as in English, there are both active and passive verbs. The key difference between the two is that in the active here, right, you'll note that you have a subject, which will perform an action sometimes on something else. So here you have the boy sees a dog. All right, this is an active verb right here. He sees a dog. The boy is doing something, and there's a direct object. But then to change that into the passive, you have a dog is seen by the boy. Note that a couple of things happen when changing from active to passive. In a sentence with a passive verb, what was originally the direct object will then become the new subject. So the first conversion to make is from direct object to subject. Direct object of an active sentence becomes the subject of a passive sentence. The next is to change the verb into the passive form. So sees would become is seen in English. And then the last is to change the subject of the original active sentence into a prepositional phrase which will express agency. Okay, so by the boy. Or, as you know, in Latin, typically this will take the form of a or ab, something in the ablative. Okay, so consider this next one. Marcus hits Julia. Notice active verb hits has a regular subject and then Julia. But to turn into the passive, Julia becomes the new subject. She was the direct object. Julia becomes your subject. Verb is turned into passive. And Julia, as the subject, receives the action of the verb. And then by Marcus, again, you have to have an expression of agency. And then finally, in the active, the teacher is making a video. Again, the teacher is your subject in the active sentence, is making is an active verb, and then a video is your direct object, which then needs to become your new subject in the sentence with a passive verb. So the video is being made. Notice that in both cases, the action is performed upon a video, right? Or the video is in some sense the result of or is acted upon by the verb. But in one case, the verb has a subject which acts upon a direct object, and in the other, that is in the passive, the verb is performed upon the actual subject. So the video is being made, and then by the teacher, your expression of agency. So if you look back in the back of your book, the ones that I gave you for your binders, you'll see that you have grammar tables, and they outline all of the passive endings. You might also remember that you have in Latin two systems of verbs. One of these is the present system, which is formed using the second principal part, or if you want, you can use the first one as well. Generally, it doesn't matter. And then the other one is the perfect system. Now, the perfect system, in the actives, you might remember, perfect system will be formed using the third principal part. But in the passives, you're going to form the perfect system based on that fourth principal part. So if you were to look at your principal parts of this verb, amo, amare, you notice that they're not listed here. These are just the passive infinitives. If you had your principal parts amo, amare, and continued, you'd have amawi, amatus, right? So you use that fourth principal part as your first element of your perfect passives, and that's going to be true for the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. All right, same thing here with moneo, monere, monui, monitus, lego, legere, legi, lectus, audio, audire, audivi, auditus. So you have that fourth principal part to form your perfect passives. And then all you have to do to form the perfect passive is take your present forms of sum, es, and est, and add them depending on whether you need the first, second, or third person. So amatus sum, I was loved. Amatus est, you were loved. Amatus est, he, she, or it was loved. Blah, 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 blah. Make sure that you change your singular into plural, and make sure the genders agree when you turn that into the plural. Right, so amatisumus, not amatusumus, wouldn't agree. Pluperfect, formed in the same way, except for you use the imperfect forms of sum added to the fourth principal part, and then the future perfect, again, the same sort of situation, but you use the future forms of sum added again to to the fourth principal part. So effectively, that fourth principal part is all that really changes, other than, of course, the switch from singular to plural. And that's going to be true for all conjugations. Fourth principal part plus a form of SA. And that will be your perfect passives. The present ones are easier. Just take a look over those and then ask me in class if you have any questions. I more or less expect that you guys know those already because we did so much practice with them last year. To do these exercises, take a look at the examples they give you. What you're trying to do here is change an active sentence into a passive sentence. So in this example, you have pater filium vocavit. The father called the boy or the son. The first thing to note is that pater is your subject, right? And then vocavit is your verb. And then filium is your direct object in the accusative case. So you then know, based on what we talked about earlier, that filium is going to become your new subject. He was receiving the action of the verb in this sentence. He needs to receive the action of the verb in this sentence. So filium needs to become your subject, and in order to become your subject, he has to be put into the nominative case. So pater filium vocavit will start filius, right? And then you need to change vocavit into the passive form of the perfect tense in the third person singular to match the perfect tense third person singular right here, and also to agree with filius. All right, so filius, he was called. You're going to take your fourth principal part, vocatus. The us can remain because it is masculine and singular, and then you need to use the third person singular ending for the perfect tense, which is est. If you take a look back at this formation, you have amatus est, monitus est, lectus est, auditus est for the third. I know that this chart maybe isn't the most efficient thing, but bear with it. So the son was called by the father. In the next one, you have effectively the same thing. The only thing that has changed is the gender of filius is now changed to filia. Here, be careful with this one, pater filios vocavit. Don't pay so much attention to what this verb is in terms of tense and number, but rather what you'll need right here for your subject. So filios, this accusative, is going to turn into your new nominative. You have filii, right? That needs to be put in the nominative. Now your verb needs to be changed into the passive, and so you need something which is perfect, but here, the perfect, it has to agree with the new subject. And notice that this is masculine and plural. So take your fourth principal part, but change it into the masculine plural with e, and then you need to make sure that verb ending is also third person plural. So these sons were called, and then remember, you need to have this expression of agency. And the agent expression will always have a or ab here. Sometimes that's suppressed, but it's easiest to just include that all the time. And then you'll usually then just change the original subject into the ablative. Okay? Take a look at this next one. Ventus mare turbavit, a wind disturbed the sea. Here what you'll want to do is take mare, which is your direct object. Note that because it's neuter, it'll stay the same in the nominative and accusative. So mare, and you want to say it was disturbed. Notice mare is neuter, so you have to have a neuter ending here, and it's going to be third person singular, so you have your third person singular ending right there. Note that the verb was perfect, and so it retained the perfect formation right here. So the sea was disturbed by what? By the wind. Here's the case where you'll typically omit a. If it's a person or something conceived of as having personhood, then you'll use a or ab. But if it's simply a force or an object, then you'll typically just use the ablative by itself. So ventus, your original subject, now needs to be placed in this agency relationship right here, by the wind. All right. Try practicing with these. I'll show you the first one here. Servus puerum excitavit. If you take careful note, you'll see that puerum is your original, current direct object. And so you need to have puer in the nominative, right? And then you want to say that he was awoken, right? You want to change excitavit. The slave awoke the boy. You want to say he was awoken. So you need to change puer. Look at your principal parts. For excito, you have excito, excitare, excitavi, excitatum, right? So you need to make sure this is masculine though. So you have excitatus, and then you need third person singular. So excitatus est in the perfect. And then you need to say that he was awoken by a slave. So then you'll have a servo. Right? A servo excitatus est. I'll do one more of these with you. So Marcus Juliam pulsavit. Notice that Juliam is your direct object, so she needs to become the new subject of the passive sentence. Julia is her nominative form. And then you want to say that she was hit, right? Notice Marcus Juliam pulsavit. Marcus hit Julia. You now want to say Julia was hit by Marcus, right? So think about your verb pulso, pulsare, pulsavi, pulsatum. You need to make it feminine to agree with Julia. So pulsata, right? And then you need to make sure that it's third person singular in the perfect, pulsata est. And then you want to say by Marcus, a Marco. All right? So do some practice with those. I'm going to have you guys try these again, and then hopefully you'll get the hang of it. Ask me if you have any questions in class.